The wind howls like a banshee across the frozen wasteland near Kostroma, Russia. Snow whips through the darkness as an old man's weathered hands desperately work to untie thick ropes from rusted railroad tracks. His breath comes in sharp puffs as the distant rumble of an approaching freight train grows louder and louder. "Faster, Sergei!" His wife screams over the storm, her voice cracking with terror. "It's coming!" Beneath them, a massive white Dogo Argentino lies motionless, her 3 tiny puppies whimpering against her bloodied fur. The ropes cut deep into their limbs, and the steel rails vibrate with increasing intensity as death approaches at 60 miles per hour. The old man's arthritic fingers fumble with the final knot. 30 seconds, 20. The train's headlight pierces the blizzard like a demon's eye. 15 seconds. The rope snaps free. Sergei scoops up the mother dog as his wife grabs the puppies. They dive from the tracks just as 20 tons of roaring metal thunder past, so close that the wind nearly tears them from their feet. But this rescue was only the beginning of a nightmare that would turn a quiet Russian village upside down, expose a criminal empire, and prove that sometimes the most unlikely heroes come on 4 legs. Because what they discovered about this dog would shock investigators, terrify criminals, and change everything they thought they knew about loyalty, courage, and the length some people will go to protect the innocent. I'm about to tell you a story so incredible, so heart-stopping, that you won't believe it's real. But every word of what I'm about to share happened exactly as I'm telling you. Before we dive deeper into this incredible tale, I need to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your country in the comments below. And if stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things move you the way they move me, hit that subscribe button. Because on Wind Echo Untold, we don't just tell stories. We uncover the hidden truths that change lives forever. Let me take you to Kostroma, a city that sits like a forgotten jewel along the Volga River in western Russia. It's February 2023, and winter has this place in a stranglehold. Temperatures haven't climbed above -20 in weeks, and the kind of snow that falls here doesn't just dust the ground. It buries everything under a blanket so thick that the world becomes unrecognizable. This is where our story begins, with 2 people who never asked to be heroes. Sergei Ivanovich is 73 years old, a retired railroad worker whose calloused hands have spent 50 years maintaining the very tracks that crisscross this frozen landscape. His wife, Irina Pavlovna, 68, spent her entire career as a veterinarian in the small villages surrounding Kostroma. Together, they've lived quietly in the same wooden house for 42 years, watching seasons change through windows that frame endless forests and abandoned railway lines. They're the kind of people you'd walk past without noticing. Sergei still wears the same wool cap he bought in 1987, and Irina still mends clothes by hand because, as she tells anyone who'll listen, nothing these days is made to last. They grow their own vegetables, split their own firewood, and have never owned a smartphone. Their daily routine is simple and predictable. Morning tea at 6 sharp, a walk through the village to check on elderly neighbors, and evenings spent reading by a wood-burning stove while the wind rattles their windows. They have no children, but they've spent decades caring for every stray animal, injured bird, and abandoned creature that crosses their path. What they don't know is that this quiet, predictable life is about to collide with forces so dark and dangerous that their very survival will depend on courage they never knew they possessed. Because sometimes fate chooses the most ordinary people to fight the most extraordinary battles. And on this particular night in February, as a blizzard screams across the Russian wilderness, fate is about to test everything Sergei and Irina believe about right and wrong. The storm hits Kostroma at 8:30 p.m. with the fury of something personal. It's not just wind and snow, it's nature unleashing 40 years of accumulated rage. Power lines snap like guitar strings, plunging half the village into darkness. Trees that have stood for decades crack and topple, their ancient roots finally surrendering to forces beyond their endurance. Sergei and Irina huddle by their stove, listening to the house groan and creak around them. The windows shake so violently, they expect glass to shatter at any moment. "I've never heard wind like this," Irina whispers, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. That's when they hear it, barely audible above the storm's fury, but unmistakable to anyone who's spent a lifetime caring for creatures in distress. A sound that cuts through howling wind and reaches straight into their hearts. The cry of something dying. Sergei grabs his flashlight and heads for the door, but Irina catches his arm. "You can't go out in this. You'll freeze to death before you get 50 yards. But Sergei has heard that sound too many times to ignore it. It's the sound of helplessness, of something innocent suffering while the world turns away. He's 73 years old, and he's never walked away from that sound in his life. They bundle themselves in every layer they own, wool coats, fur hats, thick boots that have seen 20 Russian winters. The moment they step outside, the wind hits them like a physical blow, threatening to knock them backward into their own doorway. The sound grows stronger as they follow the old railroad path. Their flashlight beam barely penetrates the swirling snow, but they press forward, step by agonizing step, toward whatever is crying out there in the darkness. The abandoned railway bridge looms ahead of them like a skeleton against the storm. It's a place locals avoid even in daylight. Too many accidents, too many dark stories whispered around kitchen tables, but the sound is coming from directly beneath it. That's when Sergei's flashlight beam catches something that stops his heart. Cold shapes on the railroad tracks, not debris from the storm. Something alive, something that shouldn't be there, something that's about to die. The beam of Sergei's flashlight reveals a scene from a nightmare. A massive white dog lies motionless across the railroad tracks. Thick ropes wound around her body like the work of someone who wanted to ensure she couldn't escape. Beside her, 3 tiny puppies, barely old enough to open their eyes, whimper and struggle against their own bonds. But it's not just the ropes that make Sergei's blood run cold. It's the wounds. Deep cuts across the mother dog's flanks, old scars that speak of systematic torture, fresh injuries that are still bleeding into the snow. Someone didn't just abandon these animals, they wanted them to suffer. Dear God in heaven, Irina breathes, and her veterinary training kicks in even as her heart breaks. She's seen animal cruelty before, but nothing this deliberate, this calculated. The distant rumble of the midnight freight train echoes across the frozen landscape. Sergei knows this line better than anyone. He maintained these tracks for decades. Train 847 comes through every night at exactly 11:47 p.m., carrying grain from the collective farms to Moscow. It weighs 20 tons and travels at 60 miles per hour through this section. They have maybe 12 minutes. Sergei drops to his knees beside the mother dog, his arthritic fingers working frantically at the knots. But whoever tied these ropes knew what they were doing. The knots are complex, pulled tight by the dog's struggles and made even more difficult by the blood that's frozen them in place. "The puppies first," Irina shouts over the wind, but when she reaches for them, the mother dog's eyes snap open. Yellow eyes filled with pain and terror, but also something else, recognition, trust, as if she understands that these 2 humans are different from the ones who hurt her. The dog doesn't growl or snap. Instead, she lies perfectly still, allowing them to work, her eyes never leaving their faces. It's a level of intelligence and awareness that catches both Sergei and Irina off guard. 8 minutes. The first puppy comes free, a tiny white ball of fur that fits in Irina's palm. She tucks it inside her coat, feeling its rapid heartbeat against her chest. The second puppy is tangled worse, the rope wound around its tiny legs in a way that makes her stomach turn. 6 minutes. Sergei's hands are bleeding now, the frozen rope cutting through his gloves, but he doesn't stop. The main knot around the mother dog's chest finally gives way, but there are more. So many more. Her legs, her neck, even her tail has been bound to ensure she couldn't move. 4 minutes. The train's headlight appears in the distance. A single point of light growing larger and brighter. The rails begin to vibrate under their knees, a rhythmic thrumming that grows more intense by the second. 3 minutes. The second puppy comes free, then the third. Irina has all 3 babies bundled, inside her coat now, but the mother dog is still trapped. The final rope is wrapped around her neck and anchored to a railroad spike that's been driven deep into a wooden tie. 2 minutes. Sergei pulls out his old railroad knife, a tool he's carried for 50 years. The blade bites into the rope, but it's thick, designed for maritime use, not easy to cut. He saws frantically, while the train bears down on them. 1 minute. The rope is fraying now, individual fibers snapping one by one, but it's not fast enough. The train is so close, they can feel the displacement of air pushing ahead of it. 40 seconds, 30 seconds. The mother dog looks directly at Sergei, and in that moment, he sees something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. Acceptance. She's given up. She's ready to die as long as her babies are safe. 20 seconds. But Sergei hasn't given up. With a roar of determination that surprises even him, he grabs the rope with both hands and pulls with every ounce of strength left in his 73-year-old body. The rope snaps. 15 seconds. He scoops up the massive dog, she has to weigh at least 90 pounds, and stumbles away from the tracks. His legs buckle, and for a terrifying moment, he thinks they're both going to fall back onto the rails. 10 seconds. Irina grabs his arm, steadying him. Together, they stagger away from the tracks just as the freight train explodes past them, its wheels throwing up a shower of sparks and ice. The sound is deafening, the wind from its passage nearly knocking them down. And then, silence. They made it, all of them. The mother dog, the 3 puppies, and 2 elderly humans who just faced down death and won. But as they catch their breath in the swirling snow, neither Sergei nor Irina realizes that saving these animals has just painted a target on their backs. Because this wasn't a case of simple abandonment. This was an execution that they've just interrupted. And somewhere in the darkness, the executioners are watching. Back in their warm kitchen, as Irina tends to the mother dog's wounds with supplies. From her old veterinary kit, they begin to understand the scope of what they've stumbled into. The injuries are too precise, too systematic to be random cruelty. Someone has been experimenting on this dog. These aren't knife wounds, Irina murmurs, examining a series of perfectly parallel scars along the dog's ribs. These are surgical incisions. Someone's been cutting her open and sewing her back up. The dog lies quietly on their kitchen floor, allowing Irina to clean and bandage her wounds. But her yellow eyes remain alert, constantly scanning the windows and doors, as if expecting danger to burst through at any moment. They name her Luna for the way her white coat seems to glow in the lamplight. The puppies they call Snow, Storm, and Spark, 3 tiny lives that almost ended before they began. But Luna is more than just a rescued animal. As Irina continues her examination, she discovers something that changes everything. A small, hard lump beneath the skin of Luna's shoulder. Something that shouldn't be there. When she carefully opens the old scar tissue, her veterinary tweezers extract a small metal cylinder, about the size of a pill capsule. It's made of military-grade titanium and engraved on its surface in Cyrillic. Letters is a code that makes her blood run cold. Project 09. Project 09. Sergei recognizes it immediately. He may be a retired railroad worker, but he spent his mandatory military service in communications. That's Soviet military technology, he whispers. But what's a dog doing with classified hardware in her body? The answer comes the next morning, when their neighbor, Anfisa Dmitrievna, pounds on their door with panic in her eyes. "They're looking for you," she gasps. "3 men in a black truck. They were asking about a white dog and her puppies. They said anyone hiding them would regret it. She describes the men in detail. City clothes, expensive boots, the kind of cold eyes that see people as obstacles rather than human beings. They left when they didn't find what they were looking for, but not before leaving a message. A hunting knife driven deep into Sergei and Irina's fence post. Attached to it, a note written in precise handwriting. The full moon is near. Return the pack, or blood will be spilled. Standing in their yard, reading words that promise violence against everything they hold dear, Sergei and Irina realize their quiet life is over. They're now part of something larger and more dangerous than they could have imagined. But they also realize something else. Luna isn't just a victim of animal cruelty, she's evidence. Evidence of crimes that someone is willing to kill to keep secret. The question is, what are they going to do about it? That night, as another blizzard builds strength, outside their windows, they make a decision that will either save them or destroy them. They're not going to run. They're not going to surrender Luna and her puppies to the monsters who tortured them. They're going to fight back. But first, they need to understand exactly what they're fighting against. And that means uncovering the truth about Project 09, no matter how dangerous that truth might be. The midpoint twist, the revelation comes from an unexpected source. Alexei Morozov, the village's only honest police officer, arrives at their door 3 days after the threat. He's a young man, maybe 35, with the kind of integrity that hasn't been crushed by years of bureaucracy and corruption. I need to see the dog, he says quietly, glancing around to make sure he hasn't been followed. When Luna limps into the room, Alexei's face goes white. Mother of God, he whispers, I know this animal. The story he tells them changes everything they thought they understood about their situation. Project 09 wasn't just animal experimentation. It was a Soviet-era program designed to create the perfect military working dog. Animals with enhanced intelligence, improved physical capabilities, and absolute loyalty to their handlers. The program was officially terminated in 1987 after a series of incidents that the government classified and buried. But like many black projects, it didn't really end. It went underground, funded by criminal organizations who saw potential in creating animals that could be used for drug smuggling, illegal fighting, and worse. Luna isn't just a Dogo Argentino. She's the product of decades of genetic manipulation and psychological conditioning. The scars on her body aren't from torture. They're from surgical procedures designed to enhance her natural abilities. She's worth millions on the black market, Alexei explains. Not just for what she is, but for what she knows. These animals are trained to remember everything: routes, faces, locations. She's a living database of criminal operations. The men who tied her to the railroad tracks weren't trying to kill her out of cruelty. They were trying to destroy evidence. Evidence of a network that spans from Moscow to the Baltic states, involving corrupt officials, international criminals, and enough money to buy silence from anyone who might interfere, but they failed. Luna survived, and now she's in the care of two people who have no idea how to handle what they've stumbled into. You have two choices, Alexei tells them. Give her back to them and pretend none of this ever happened, or help me expose the whole network, knowing that they'll do everything in their power to stop us. Sergei looks at Luna, who's sleeping peacefully beside the stove with her 3 puppies nestled against her warmth. She trusts them completely. This genetically modified creature who's been tortured and experimented on by humans her entire life. The choice is easy. We fight, Irina says simply, whatever it takes. But fighting means understanding their enemy. And their enemy is more dangerous, more organized, and more ruthless than 2 elderly Russians could have imagined. The attack comes on the 7th night after the rescue, during the worst blizzard in 20 years. Sergei is splitting firewood in the shed behind their house when Luna suddenly goes rigid. Her hackles rise, and she emits a low growl that seems to vibrate through the floorboards. Irina peers through the frost-covered window and sees them. 3 figures, moving through the snow like ghosts, their faces hidden behind ski masks, carrying something that glints metallic in the moonlight. They've come for Luna, and they're not planning to ask nicely. "Sergei!" she hisses, but he's already moving. 50 years of railroad work have given him an instinctive understanding of danger, and every alarm bell in his head is screaming. The first man reaches their front door and doesn't knock. Instead, he produces a crowbar and begins prying at the frame with the methodical patience of someone who's done this before. The wood splinters with sounds like gunshots in the quiet night. But Luna is already moving. Despite her injuries, despite the surgical scars that crisscross her body, she positions herself between the door and the 3 puppies, with the fluid grace of a predator that's never forgotten how to kill. The door explodes inward. The first intruder steps through, and that's when Luna shows them what Project 09 really created. She doesn't bark or growl or give any warning. She simply launches herself forward with the speed of something that was designed to be perfect at violence. 90 pounds of genetically enhanced muscle and bone slam into the man's chest, driving him backward into the snow. His weapon, a cattle prod designed to subdue dangerous animals, flies from his hands and disappears into a snowbank. But there are 2 more men, and they're ready for her. The second intruder raises what looks like a modified tranquilizer gun, but Sergei appears behind him like an avenging spirit. His railroad hammer, the same tool he's used for 50 years to drive spikes and shape steel, catches the man across the temple with a sound like a melon dropping. The third man is faster, smarter, and more dangerous than his companions. Instead of going for Luna, he goes for Irina, grabbing her around the throat with one arm while pressing a knife to her neck with the other. "Call off the dog," he snarls in accented Russian. "Call her off, or the old woman dies." For a moment, the world freezes. Luna stands over the first intruder, her teeth bared, every muscle coiled for another attack. Sergei holds his hammer ready, his aged hands steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. And Irina stares directly at her husband, with eyes that say everything she can't speak aloud. Do what you have to do. Don't let them win. That's when Luna does something that none of them expect. She doesn't attack the man holding Irina. Instead, she looks directly at Sergei and gives a soft whine, a sound of communication rather than distress. Sergei understands immediately. This dog isn't just intelligent, she's tactical. "Okay," he says, dropping his hammer. "Okay, you win. Just don't hurt her." The man with the knife relaxes slightly, thinking he's gained control of the situation. That's his mistake. Luna doesn't attack him. She attacks the ground beneath his feet. With surgical precision, she digs her claws into the throw rug the man is standing on and yanks backward. His feet go out from under him, and as he falls, his grip on Irina loosens just enough for her to twist away. Sergei's hammer finds its target before the man can regain his balance. The fight is over in less than 3 minutes. 3 professional criminals, armed and prepared, defeated by a 73-year-old railroad worker, his veterinarian wife, and a genetically modified dog who's finally found something worth protecting. But as they tie up the unconscious intruders, with the same kind of rope that was used to bind Luna to the railroad tracks, they realize this victory is just the beginning. These men were foot soldiers, not leaders. Somewhere in the darkness, more dangerous enemies are planning their next move. Alexei arrives 30 minutes later with backup, 3 officers he trusts completely in a region where trust is a luxury few can afford. They find Sergei and Irina calmly drinking tea while their prisoners slowly regain consciousness. "We need to move fast," Alexei tells them. "These men work for Dmitry Volkov, and he's not going to accept this kind of failure. He'll send more people, better armed and less patient than these 3. But Luna has given them something more valuable than a temporary victory. When the officers search the intruder's vehicle, they find surveillance equipment, encrypted communications devices, and a detailed map of the entire criminal network that stretches from Kostroma to the Baltic ports. The evidence is overwhelming. Names, dates, locations, financial transactions, everything needed to bring down an organization that's operated in the shadows for decades. The raid happens at dawn, coordinated across 7 cities simultaneously. Luna's rescue has provided investigators with the missing piece they needed to crack open Project 09 and expose every criminal, corrupt official, and black market dealer connected to the network. Dmitry Volkov is arrested in his Moscow penthouse, surrounded by evidence of crimes that stretch back 20 years. His operation included not just the illegal breeding and modification of animals, but human trafficking, drug smuggling, and assassination services that reached into the highest levels of government. The 3 men who attacked Sergei and Irina are revealed to be former Spetsnaz soldiers, dishonorably discharged and recruited by Volkov for jobs too dangerous or too dirty for civilian criminals. Their capture leads to the arrest of 17 other mercenaries and the exposure of a training facility hidden in the forests outside St. Petersburg. But perhaps most importantly, the investigation uncovers the full scope of Project 09. Luna wasn't the only survivor. Hidden in facilities across Eastern Europe, investigators find 43 other animals. Dogs, wolves, and even several big cats, all products of the same genetic manipulation program. Each animal carries the same titanium implant, the same surgical scars, and the same haunted intelligence in their eyes. They've all been rescued now, placed in specialized facilities where experts are working to undo decades of psychological conditioning and physical modification. For Sergei and Irina, the aftermath brings changes they never expected. Their story spreads across Russia and beyond, making international news as an example of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Interview requests pour in from journalists around the world, but they decline them all. "We just did what anyone would do," Sergei tells the local reporter who catches them outside their home. "We saw something that needed help, and we helped." But Luna knows better. During the weeks of investigation and trials, she never leaves their side. She seems to understand that these 2 humans didn't just save her life, they changed the course of history for dozens of other innocent creatures. The puppies, Snow, Storm, and Spark, grow strong and healthy under Irina's care. When they're old enough, they're adopted by carefully screened families who understand they're not ordinary dogs. Each family receives extensive training on how to care for animals with enhanced intelligence and specific emotional needs. Snow goes to a family with 2 young children who treat him like the intelligent, sensitive creature he is. Storm finds a home with a retired soldier who understands the kind of trauma that comes from being bred for violence. Spark becomes a therapy dog, working with children who've experienced abuse and abandonment. But Luna stays with Sergei and Irina, not because she has to, but because she chooses to. In their quiet kitchen, surrounded by the warmth of people who see her as family rather than property, she finally learns what it means to be truly free. The criminal network is dismantled completely. Volkov receives a life sentence without possibility of parole. His associates face prison terms ranging from 15 to 30 years. More importantly, the investigation leads to reforms in animal welfare laws and the establishment of a special task force dedicated to preventing the kind of abuse Luna suffered. The old railway bridge where Luna was left to die becomes something of a pilgrimage site. People from across Russia come to leave flowers and small tokens, turning a place of intended death into a monument to hope and courage. 6 months after the rescue, Kostroma holds its first annual Lunar Festival, a celebration. of animal welfare and community heroism. The entire village comes together to honor not just Luna and her puppies, but all the animals that were saved because two people decided to do the right thing. Sergei and Irina are named heroes of the Russian Federation, an honor that comes with a modest pension and national recognition. They accept the award graciously, but insist that the real hero is Luna. She survived things that would have broken most creatures, Irina tells the gathered crowd. She never lost her capacity to trust, to love, to protect the innocent. If anyone deserves to be called a hero, it's her. The festival becomes an annual tradition, growing larger each year as people from around the world come to Kostroma to celebrate the triumph of compassion over cruelty. Luna, now fully healed and healthy, serves as the guest of honor each year, greeting visitors with the gentle dignity of someone who's seen the worst of humanity and chosen to trust the best. As I write this story, Luna is still alive and thriving in the home of Sergei and Irina Ivanovich. She's 8 years old now, her white coat showing just a hint of gray around the muzzle, but her eyes remain as bright and intelligent as the day. She was rescued from those railroad tracks. Her 3 puppies have grown into magnificent adults, each making their own mark on the world. Snow has become a search and rescue dog, using his enhanced abilities to save lives in natural disasters. Storm works with veterans suffering from PTSD, providing comfort and companionship to those who've seen too much violence. Spark continues her work as a therapy dog, helping children heal from trauma that once seemed insurmountable. But the real legacy of Luna's story isn't measured in awards or recognition or even the criminals brought to justice. It's measured in the simple truth that 2 ordinary people, faced with an extraordinary situation, chose compassion over comfort, courage over safety. They could have walked away. They could have told themselves that it wasn't their problem, that they were too old, that the risk was too great. They could have made a dozen excuses that would have sounded perfectly reasonable to anyone who heard them. Instead, they listened to something deeper than reason. They listen to the voice that tells us we're all connected, that the suffering of innocence diminishes us all, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not by soldiers or politicians or heroes, but by ordinary people who simply refuse to walk away from what's right. Sergei still maintains the old railroad paths around Kostroma, checking them regularly for signs that someone might be using them for dark purposes. Irina continues to care for every injured animal brought to her door, though none have carried the secrets and significance of Luna. She spends her days doing what every dog deserves to do, playing in the sun, sleeping by a warm fire, and knowing without question that she's loved and protected by people who would face any danger to keep her safe. The railway bridge where we found her has been declared a protected historical site. A small plaque reads, "Here, on February 15th, 2023, ordinary people proved that heroes come in all forms and that love is stronger than cruelty." But perhaps the most important part of Luna's legacy is this. Her story reminds us that we all have the capacity to be heroes. We all have moments when we hear the cry of something innocent in distress. The question isn't whether we're brave enough or strong enough or young enough to help. The question is simply, will we listen? Today, somewhere in the world, there's another Luna tied to another set of railroad tracks. There's another innocent creature depending on someone like you to make the choice between walking away and walking toward danger. What will you choose? This has been Wind Echo Untold, where we don't just tell stories, we uncover the truths that change lives. Luna's story is real, documented and verified by multiple sources including court records, police reports and veterinary examinations. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, then I need you to do something for me. Share this story. Tell it to someone who needs to remember that heroes aren't born. They're made by the choices we make when no one is watching. Subscribe to Wind Echo Untold for more stories of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between humans and the animals who trust us to protect them. Because every subscription, every share, every comment helps us reach more people with stories that matter. And in the comments below, tell me about a time when you chose to help instead of walking away. Tell me about your own moment of ordinary heroism, because I guarantee you've had one. We all have. Sometimes we just need to be reminded. Luna is watching the snow fall outside her warm kitchen window as I finish writing this. She's surrounded by the people who love her, safe in the knowledge that her nightmare is over and her real life has finally begun. That's the power of choosing compassion over indifference. That's the miracle that happens when ordinary people decide to become heroes. Until next time, remember, the world is full of railroad tracks and creatures tied to them. The question is, which train are you going to stop?